Awesome. Hello, marketers. This is Funnel Lab, and welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. Funnel Lab Fridays is a weekly LinkedIn live session where we dive into use cases and challenges data savvy marketers. I'm your host, Eric Westerkamp, CEO of CaliberMind, and joining me today are Jordan Crawford of Blueprint GTM and Doug Bell of CaliberMind. And today, Jordan, Doug, and I will be talking about sort of building outbound motions, kind of brick by brick. Welcome, Jordan. Welcome, Doug. Thank you for being on the show. Jordan, welcome back to the Funnel Lab. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about what you and Blueprint do to help organizations build and optimize their sort of outbound motions.
Yeah, so thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. I don't know what I did wrong the first time to have you have me back, but I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, I think that so the type of work that we do is really deploy what I call the go-to-market insight triangle, and that starts with kind of some of the stuff that you're now doing programmatically, Eric. It's really understanding why the customer bought. This is the part that we generally skip out. If you think about kind of how outbound used to be done in the past, it's like down a list of titles from ZoomInfo, find their emails, and show up and throw up is what I call it. It's like add a little, hey, Jordan, can you wear a hat? I wear a hat. Like, here's everything that we do. And that actually doesn't take into the consideration why the customer bought. And so you really want to have rich understanding of why the customer bought. And if you can then map that to data, which is to say that re-describing that customer story in the data, then you get the message for free. So customer insight, data at scale, which is what we help with. And then you get the message for free because all it's doing is re-describing the situation that another customer was in to a prospective lead. And then that is the message. And so, you know, we talk a lot about the when to reach out. And it's just a reconstruction of that story. I'm happy to like give you some example details if that's helpful, but that's like at a high level.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Doug, welcome back. You've got some pretty strong opinions on sort of the role of outbound sales and marketing. So let me ask you, is outbound selling dead?
Yeah, it's funny because you would think that I would be oil and water compared to Jordan because Jordan's business model sort of built on this idea that it's not. And I would say, you know, not that long ago, let's say pre-pandemic, it was not unusual to walk into your typical SaaS or tech company and see one room full of SDRs. And those days of sort of counting on outbound, cold outbound as a motion, I would say, definitely receded. Now, is it dead? No. The thing I push back against is this idea that you can do cold outreach and have it be successful. And sort of the model that's really been implanted in my head over the last couple of years is, well, you better get that engagement up and you better, and George started pointing this out in his business model, you better know who you're targeting and why you're targeting them. And so those days of skipping that, and whatever technique you want to call it, let's say that's account-based marketing, or let's say that you've got a really good engagement model, you're warming up your market ahead of time. I think outbound's dead, but I think this idea of cold outbound is lost forever.
Yeah. So Jordan, Blueprint has a kind of a unique take on determining what an organization's accounts should be. I think this kind of dovetails into it. To be honest, the conversation the three of us had yesterday, where we were really kind of riffing around like intent data and black box intent versus sort of open intent and where it plays in the sales cycle. But you can kind of talk a little bit about like sort of your thoughts on that and like, you know, what you're seeing work, you're seeing not work out there in the market.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the thing about sort of this black box intent, which is when we think about intent, it's like someone was searching on some important B2B website, and because someone was searching on that important website in your category, hit everyone at that account. The challenge with that is because you don't know how the data was compiled, you don't know why you're reaching out. Hey, Doug, I was looking over your back porch to see what you were doing in the background there. Like, hey, interested in some B2B data, Doug? Like, it doesn't give you any messaging, which is the problem. And so you're not actually testing anything. All you're doing is testing, did I paid good money for this. Could it work? And I don't know that that's anything more interesting than just downloading a list from Apollo or ZoomInfo finding emails and sending those emails. So we built a tool to actually do something different. The way that most people build account lists is like North America, 50 to 1,000 employees, you know, they wake up in the morning. Aha, that's your list. And we actually have inverted this model, and we pull in about 4 million job postings every 3 months. And what we allow you to do is actually sort those jobs by density of keywords. So you basically can talk and say, which companies are hiring for roles that talk the most about the problems that I can solve. And that means that there's timing, right? Because there's a job posting recently, and you're not trying to replace that person. You just want to know what's on the account's mind. So there's timing. You also know why you're reaching out. And the thing is, this is where you can deploy AI here is you can say how their problem relates to what you do. And AI is really good at connecting two dots. Here's all the context on me. Here's the context on the company, rich context, right? They describe everything that you're doing. Blend those two things together and talk about how my solution specifically relates to a problem that they are struggling with today. I'm happy to kind of show you what it looks like. That's like at a high level what that looks like.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think at the end here, we're going to jump into kind of a little bit of a show and tell here for the product. And that plays really well into some of the things that we're talking about where we're seeing customers that are really interested in intent data. They're trying to mix that intent data with first party data. And the challenge we're seeing with sort of black box systems is it doesn't really allow them to sort of understand the interactions and when these intent signals are really important. And it also doesn't allow them to differentiate. Different intent signals mean different things at different times, right? Your intent, your intent is probably a pretty high, a signal is showing, hey, there's something really going on. They're doing jobs, right? Now, when depending on your product, that may be either an early or a lag indicator. Like you may have needed to get in there before that. Yeah. You're already late, or it may be like that's the trigger for you to come in, right? And that's your business.
Well, and let's also talk about this word trigger because you see a lot of these platforms that are like looking for signals and then deploying against signals. And the problem with that approach is that the more people use it, the worse it gets. And no great product is like that. It's like anti-network effect. So, there used to be a play that's like, hey, Jordan, I saw you raise money. I like money. Can I have your money? And that was the gist of the play. And it would be in different ways. But founders get hit up all the time. They raise money. The problem is that there's no differentiation there. And so people will use this. A lot of people use job data today, but they're like hiring SDR message about, my company or whatever. But actually the real meat is in the job description. And that's where AI can be amazing. It's like, you're trying to solve these exact challenges. It can take in the context of the website. It actually can even give you ideas. One of the best plays that I've ever run was about a year ago where I scraped company websites and I said, I asked AI, hey, AI, give me ideas about how AI can be used in this business. So AI wrote these one-to-one emails about like, hey, here's ways that AI that can be used in your business. That company got like 10 meetings a day because you're actually deploying AI against you're actually using it creatively, and then you're deploying it in such a way that's not like write a message. You're actually giving it context. You're constraining the output, and you're asking it to be ultra creative. And that creative constraint with context is the best way to deploy AI with high signal intent.
Yeah, that's awesome. But Doug, when you're starting to think about outbound and the changes that are kind of happening as it relates to sort of first party, third party data. What do you think about like what motions need to kind of change? Like how do you think about the outbound motion, how it actually needs to change based upon kind of what, the fact that the current motions that a lot of companies are doing are just not functioning anymore. People are using intent, but intent needs to be blended a little bit better into your first party data to do something. You got these BDR teams and SDR teams that are kind of running plays that are having decreasing efficacy, right? What do you think needs to change out there?
I think there is an underlying. I think you have to disabuse yourself as a marketer of this idea that you can create a deal cycle, especially if your product is more than $10,000 and you cannot self-install it. So below that price point, maybe it's different.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is that really what you're doing is you want to be in a place where you're outbounding, puts you on that list when a prospect has a need. And so if you're, you used to design models that were really about your closing to the meeting. If that outbound motion can create a meeting, then it's a successful outbound motion. And what ended up happening over time is you were incenting more and more and more for those meetings because that was the KPI that's going to drive conversions. Well, guess what? Your model started to sort of lean into this idea of any meeting is a good meeting, right? In other words, I get a meeting, I'm going to create a deal out of thin air.
Yeah.
So that's the piece that's really changed. And this is where you mentioned first party and intent data, Eric, and sort of how you think about it, blend those things. And I feel like they're very good representatives of what you should do next. It's sort of framing the market. It's not the end. In other words, you want to be driving. You want to go and say, look, based on intent, I think this is a customer set. And then what you want to be able to do is to say, can I increase or can I create engagement as represented by first party data, then react to that. And so for me, outbound's not dead, but if you will, this idea of sort of dumb outbound is long past. And it's your ability to, and by the way, every company is going to do it slightly differently. You're going to have this combination of intent engagement data, first party data, and it's sort of your ability to interpret that. And that's really the big gap in the market right now is, does a marketer take that data, rationalize it, understand it, and react to it? You've got the data, and that's one of the reasons the Jordan's model is so interesting. It gives you that framework to sort of rationalize and unpack that data.
So are you saying that that you can't create demand with outbound, that you have to only react to demand that's out there?
In the current economy, yes. There are demand gen people listening to this call right now throwing things at the wall going, you just blew up the entire premise of my job. That's not what I'm saying. But let's face it, we're in a SaaS recession. We probably have been for the last couple of years. And if a company makes an active decision to go seek out software, it is an active decision. It's not casual. They're getting approval before they go out there because they had the experience in 2022 of going, we should get software. The CFO goes, right? So if there's somebody out there shopping, they put some time and homework in, and that's where intent data comes in. And that's where your ability to use digital engage is hyper important because when they start that journey, they're messing around, right? So you need to get in front of them. And if you don't do that, you're not creating a deal. You're just not in the deal.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's actually a point here that I want to reemphasize that Doug just said about you can't create demand. We ran a play one time where Segment had a free startup program, so startups could use their product for free. So we looked at the amount of funding that they raised at the time, the year the startup was founded, if they had installed Segment. So we knew that they were part of the startup Segment program, and we also knew that it had been almost 2 years. So they were going to go from a $0 bill to a $60,000 to $80,000 bill, like overnight. And we also gave them comps on the market of how much Segment was going to cost based on their web traffic. So they were going to go, get a $6,000 bill. Now, the company that I was working for was a competitor, and they were like, hey, we'll extend this off for 2 years. It's a one-line change from Segment. And it failed miserably because there was no that had never happened in the market. No one had switched over, or very few people would switch over from Segment to this competitor. And so I actually got more deals for me. That this email is amazing, but there's no way I'm switching over from Segment. And that's because it wasn't actually anchored on any customer buying behavior in the market. And so I was just making stuff up in the data, right? And so it's a huge problem if you just try to connect these data without any theory associated about why a customer has actually bought in the past.
Super interesting. But we're going to jump into tool time in just a second. Before we do that, could you, Jordan, maybe unpack a little bit black box versus open intent and the difference kind of between what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah. So the thing that I hear kind of all the time is like, hey, we use these intent providers and the ones that and we we don't know how to measure if it works, right? The intent providers go in your CRM and they just stamp the hell out of everything. And because it's black box, you're like, did they tell it to me, or or were we already going to go after that account? Were they going to close anyways? And so the problem with any tool that is selling you something where you can't measure results is a problem, right? So that's the challenge with black box. Is like, as a marketer, advantage person, you can't do anything interesting on that data. You just have to sort of, well, I guess I should renew because they stamp their name on things. Now, if the intent is sort of opened up to give you the context of why are you contacting that account, that not only means that you can be more creative with that intent data. What are you going to message? How are you going to talk to that account? Because you have context on that problem. But it also means that you can differentiate yourself out of the other people that are buying the same intent data as you, right? And so it's really the insight that you have on how you sort the market here and the problems, and then how you take that non-black box intent data and deploy it back out to the market. And that's why you hire great people, to be able to do that. And intent doesn't allow your people to deploy that creativity to market. And
take black box doesn't allow them to sort of see what's really going on. And so you're getting the same, like your version of what's happening is the same as anyone else in your competitors who use that same product.
Yeah,
they're all standing the same accounts to go after and do things, and you can't differentiate yourself and understand how they play and where it plays in your buying cycle, things like that.
And also, it leads to worse thinking because you just close your eyes and you throw darts at the intent accounts, right? So you don't have any opinion about why that account should need you, right? You're just like, you went on the website, you were looking at my competitor's thing, which, by the way, you don't even know that. The privacy laws are making that harder and harder, right? And so what are you going to say that your competitors can't say? You're in a rat race. And if you can capture demand in ways in which you talk to the intent data, it just means that you're going to have a leg up against your competitor that compounds over time as you learn. That does not happen with the account data, with the intent data today.
Yeah, interesting. I think that plays really well into the concept that Doug and I have been talking a lot about of marketing decision engines. A good tool that can help you decide around these things allows you to see those differences. Like, it allows you to understand this came from here and this intent showed up here, and they play into these buying cycles. And oh, by the way, this segment of my users had a different behavior than this segment of my users. It allows you to kind of really look at it in those ways.
It's so important because that segmentation is also the messaging, right? Because you're saying this pocket of the market bought for this reason, and here was the context of why they bought. You just need to match that with data. And then that's automation, by the way. It's like customer insight, take that customer insight to the same bucket of new possible customers that would like to know that insight, and then you can deploy that message, and that's the insight triangle.
Awesome. Hey, so I think we're right at time to jump in, and Jordan, I think I'm going to let you share your screen. Amazing. And kind of take us through a little bit of some of the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. So super high level, my company will pull. We monitor over 1 million companies for their job postings. Job postings have a lot of this intent data. Now, the goal here is not to say, are you hiring sales development reps? Are you hiring these titles? It actually is to be able to sort all of that data by density of the problem in the job description. And it's not to replace these people. It's like, don't hire this person, hire my tool instead. It's to know that the account cares about this and to take that context and describe your product and your value in terms of that context. So now that I have that sort of set up, I run a search here inside of Blueprint Intent. So I say, just look at the jobs posted in the last 90 days. And what I did is I searched for keywords inside of these job descriptions. So I care about people that are buying these tools, ZoomInfo, Apollo, that are doing account research, account scoring, talking about ICP, they're data-driven. So then I just said, we built this machine learning model to identify seniorities and departments. So I said, I just want the sales department. And I actually don't want companies who describe themselves as research companies, or if they say ZoomInfo. So just a really simple query. Now I could get fancier and say size, the country, etc. So 21,000 jobs out of about the 4 million that we have in the last 90 days. This is sorted by density of the keyword. So this business development rep talks the most. Outbound motion, research, collect company details, personalized outbound email sequences, creative-oriented approaches, right? So if I'm helping people find and structure data, this company might be a really great company to look at. Now, what I did here is I just copied a bunch of this context into ChatGPT, and I just posted a bunch of the job description data, and I said, hey, like, I sell company research, scraping the web. Tell me the quotes in all these job descriptions that are most relevant to me, how they're relevant, and a quote from the actual job description. So this is where AI is going to be amazing, because I came in with opinion about how the query was structured. So I've sorted the market. And you can see ChatGPT is like, yo, research, identify, and engage prospective customers. Like, collect company details, send thoughtful and personalized outbound email sequences. You're not going to do that with a sequencing tool. You're going to do that with a Jordan tool. So it's relevant. And I said, yo, tell me why it's relevant. Research potential customers. So I can now go there and say, I know the company cares about this. What I can even do from there, because I can create this, basically what an SDR with unlimited time and AI powered would do, they would go to that company website, figure out what types of data they would care about to research. And I can use AI to invent the data that they would care about. Now I have intent. I have a message about the problems, and I have a message that's really relevant to them and the types of data that they would care about. And I can only do that because I've first sorted the market by who has the highest density of the problem I solve and the context about how they're thinking about that problem.
Understand. Super exciting. It's a great use of generative AI and some of these tools, right? I know we're internally playing with doing this to summarize first-party data for our customers, right? This is a great way of kind of going out and getting that third-party website data, whatever, kind of when you're funneling these types of tools.
Yeah, and these are companies that are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire someone to solve a problem. And they're going to need some set of tools. And you even can know what tools they're using because it'll describe it in the job descriptions. And so, if you find someone that says, hey, go build a house, and it's like the only tool you have is a hammer, you're like, ooh, you're going to need something more than a hammer to build that house.
Right.
So you have some understanding about what to say to them because, it's like, hey, Jordan, with that hammer, the only thing you're going to hit is your foot. You need
It really helps them empower the sales teams really with sort of messaging and things like that when they actually do their outbound.
And you can deploy counterintuitive insights. Like some of these people are like, buy a sequencing tool or something. It's like, hey, generally we found that there are these challenges when you just dump a bunch of things into title-based targeting. So you can actually deliver a useful message with market data that you have collected because you know how they're thinking about the problem.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we are just about at time. Doug, Jordan, thanks so much for being on Funnel Lab Fridays. And we will be back next week with, I believe, Doug, you as the host.
That's right. I'll be taking over the deep and big shoes for Eric, but I'll be hosting next week. Looking forward to seeing everybody then.
Quick question. Do I get a jacket if I go 3 times?
Yeah, he's fine. Isn't he done?
Change the bar. Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
That's all good.